so nice to be here with you today, Michelle.
Hi, Karen. It's so nice to be with you. It's been a while.
So let's jump right in then. So you were a teacher before you were an author. I think you taught elementary school, right?
Yes, I did. Fourth grade.
Excellent. Ah, one of my favorite grades. So I'm wondering what inspired you to make the leap into writing children's books? Like, how did your background in education shape the way that you approach writing, but also how you approach science writing? Because that's really what you do.
Yeah, my first job after college, my first professional job was actually as a naturalist at an environmental camp. And so I was teaching outdoor courses like coastal ecology. And then when I was a teacher, I was known as a science person. Everybody knew that about me. And so the leap to children's books was kind of natural, especially writing science books for kids. And in fact, my first book that I did with you, Flying Deep, is I wrote the book that I wish that I had when I was teaching, because I had there was an Alvin pilot I used to have come visit my classroom. His name is Don Calatius, and the kids were super interested in what he had to say. I was curious, and at the time there weren't really any books for that age range about Alvin. So later, when I decided to write books for kids, I was like, I should really write about Alvin, and that became my first book. So really, noticing what kids are interested and excited about is a lot of what helps me with deciding what to write about now.
That's great. And I feel like that front row seat when you're an educator to know every day what kids are looking for or asking about or what they are excited about is just really an amazing place to jump off from in order to start writing.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
That's great. Okay, so then let's talk then, because you write about science, yes, but you write about marine biology, right? About the ocean. And so your books, the topics are really complex, or they can be really complex, but somehow you manage to make them really accessible and engaging for young people. And so I'm wondering, like, what strategies do you think about or do you use when you have to take those really big concepts and make them into things that a kid can absorb and really spark curiosity and wonder?
I try to think about going back to the idea of what students are interested in, trying to find something that might be a hook or a way in for a reader. So, for example, with Diving Deep, the book our second book together, that book flowed from the first one because Bruce Strickrott, the Alvin pilot who had helped me a lot with Flying Deep, said we really should have a book about all the different kinds of vehicles that go study the deep ocean, that take humans deep in the ocean. And so that was sort of the hook idea, vehicles or machines. And I hear from people now that gets kids into more biology. I just recently I've this lovely email exchange with parents of a 4-year-old kid who emailed me and said, we found this book, Diving Deep. Our kid is super into vehicles. He loves the book, but now he's really into all animals and marine science because you hooked him with the vehicles. He was always into trucks and things like that. And now their whole family is digging into learning more about ocean science because of that first book that got them hooked in. And he's reading other books of mine now and building things that like are inspired by what he saw from the book. So a lot of it is to try to think about what's the thing that's going to get a kid interested, or what am I interested in? What am I excited about? Because if I'm excited, somebody else is going to be excited about that too. My curiosity, my sense of wonder and excitement.
So that's such a great story. And I love that this idea of one thing leading to another thing, which is the dream, right? When we make books for kids, is that it'll spark some interest they have and make them go look for more. And that kind of makes me think a little bit about your Window into the Ocean Twilight Zone book, which you wrote for middle graders, right? So you're writing picture books for younger readers, you're writing middle grade, and those are such different audiences that you have to really figure out, how do I write this for the age group that it's for, right?
Right. I'm bringing my knowledge as a teacher to that process all the time. So when I was teaching, I used to have lots of experts come into my classroom, scientists, archaeologists, history people, all different people coming in. And a lot of folks would enter and not necessarily always explain things in the most kid accessible way. And so before they would even talk to my class, I would say, just to prep you, if it's okay, I might jump in and help make clarifying remarks. And I would be really watching my students to see when did they get a furrowed brow or when were they confused. And I very quickly was able to learn the places where confusion would crop in. And I use that to guide me in my writing. I think about, if I were reading this to my students, when would they have a furrowed brow, or when would they be asking me questions? And I try to reframe and reword things in a kid appropriate way, while also maintaining scientific accuracy, which is really the big challenge of all this, as you know. And science experts are incredibly helpful for me in that regard, where I always have science experts read my work and tell me if I have something, maybe I've simplified it too much and I've made it inaccurate, and they help me clarify those mistakes that I might have made.
So that's fantastic. And I love that you just mentioned experts, because let's talk about the research for a minute, right? So
Yeah.
writing about the natural world, you have to do loads and loads of research. And I think for your new book with us, the newest book, which is Jellyfish Scientist, Maude Delap and her mesmerizing medusas, what was your research process for that book? Like, was there anything in particular that surprised or inspired you while you were working on it? And how did you go about figuring out what you needed to know about her and her work?
Well, you talked about one thing leading to another for kids, and that's what happened with this book. I was researching for a different project when I saw Maude mentioned. She was mentioned in this article. I was living in Ireland at the time, and I was immediately sucked in by her story, because this is a woman who, back in 1899, she did not have a formal education, and yet she went on to do groundbreaking science. She was the first person in the world that we know of to ever raise jellyfish through a full life cycle, which, if people don't know, they go through basically metamorphosis like butterflies or frogs. So the juvenile stage is very different. So I was hooked. I was like, kids need to know about her. And I was living in Ireland, so I did as much research as I could while in Ireland. So I read every article or book that I could find through the through the public library, through local institutions. Then I went to the Museum of Natural History, the Dublin Natural History Museum, and I went to the archives, because Maude wrote letters to the keeper for 40 years. I read every letter and came away feeling like, Maude's my friend. I want to be friends with her. I know so much about her. And then I also visited the heart of Ireland where she was from. She studied compass jellyfish in this first experiment that I describe in the book. I saw compass jellyfish out near where she was from on the beach. So I did all of this real field research. I got to hold jars that she had used in her work. So all of that research was important, but I didn't write the book till I got home. So even then, once I was back here in the States, once we had moved back and I was finishing the book, I still was reaching out to experts, more experts back in Ireland, a marine biologist, an expert in Irish history and Irish language. And they all were incredibly helpful in my research process as well.
So can you tell me a little bit, and this is something that comes up a lot while I'm editing books, is that I'll say to an author, hey, I can't find this, I can't verify this fact anywhere. Where did you find this? Or what's your source? So how do you manage all the information when you're writing?
I know you think I have a very intricate system. I actually have not always been awesome at it. I'm much better now than I have been in the past. I'm lucky that I have a good memory and I have a visual memory. So oftentimes I can visualize where that fact is. So I'm like, it's in such a notebook, such and such notebook on the right-hand side of the page, and I can flip through and go find it. But I've gotten better in recent years, where I've been using Scrivener more often. And I set up research folders at the bottom. But there was one time, I can't remember what it was. It was for this book. You asked me about something and I was like, oh my gosh. And I was like rifling through. I knew it was in a notebook, but I didn't know where. And I had to go find it. So I have learned over time. I always have the research. And I'm much better now with my more recent projects, where I can keep better track of the research than I did, especially by using Scrivener. And we had that fun experience. I don't know if you remember this detail, but when Ellen was doing the illustrations for the opening, in the opening of the book, Maude is rowing a currach, an Irish rowboat, out into the water. And Ellen had questions about what currach she would use. And it turns out they're different all over, depending on what part of Ireland you come from. The boat looks different. And that was another case where I went back to my expert who had helped me in the first place, who was the keeper of the Natural History Museum. And he was like, I don't know the answer, but I know who does. And he sent me to this person who is studying the designs of currachs. And he was able to send us within a day or two, like 5 images, photographs and paintings, so that Ellen could use that in her work. So sometimes we're going back and getting more research even once we've already, the book was already written and edited and art's being made. And now we're still getting more details like that after the fact.
That's fantastic. And also, I just want to throw out and say how happy I am that there are people in the world that study every tiny little thing in the world, because that dude who studies the Karax, like, oh my gosh, how awesome is that? All right. So let's switch over a little bit about sort of inspiring kids. So many kids are fascinated by the ocean and by sea creatures and also general science too, right?
Yeah.
But when I was young, science for me felt out of reach. It felt like it was something big and important, and that important people did it, right? And unless you were going to decide to be a scientist, there was really no place for you. And you and I have talked, though, about how there's lots of ways to be involved with science without being a scientist. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's something I actually care a lot about, because there are so many ways to support the science and support scientific research and be a really important member of the team without having to be the scientist or the engineer. Those are important jobs. We need scientists and engineers, and I hope kids pursue those fields. But also, when I was writing A Window into the Ocean Twilight Zone, I firsthand really got to observe this. I intellectually understood it, but I really saw firsthand how being on a ship that's doing ocean research in the middle of the North Atlantic, everyone is important. So the cook on the ship, that cook was incredibly important for keeping us well fed, giving us the calories we need to do these 24/7 operations on the ship, but also to keep morale up. He cooked amazing food for us. Or the bosun, who is the person who is taking charge of the deck, the aft deck, where everything is being deployed. So we're putting equipment over the edge. That person makes sure everybody is safe, that everything is going in the ocean and coming out of the ocean safely. There's technicians on board who run the technology, the bank of computers that help communicate with the equipment that's over the side. There was someone who welded. There was a piece that got broken on the mock nest. That's the big net system that we were using. The piece broke. We're in the middle of the Atlantic. We can't go pick up a new piece. But there's someone with the skills to do welding on the ship. So every research vessel has people like this doing jobs on the ship. So all those are important jobs. And then science communication, like what I do, where I write books to communicate to people what the science is. I also have done blog posts for Hui, a way to help share what the scientists do with the general public that's described in a way that is clear for the general public. These are all ways people can be part of science, and artists too. More and more artists, dancers, musicians are engaging and helping to convey information about science. So there's a place for anyone who's interested to have a role in science if they want to have one.
So let's shift a little and talk about the next book that you and I are doing together. Will you tell us a little bit about that one?
Yeah, so right now that book is called Tiny But Mighty Plankton, and it's planned for summer of 28. And basically, I got excited to write this book when I was on the expedition to write A Window into the Ocean Twilight Zone, because we were there specifically to study a plankton bloom. So phytoplankton, if you don't know, are mostly microscopic organisms that live in the ocean, or all in any water, actually, but we were studying the ocean. They photosynthesize just like trees on land. And so the phytoplankton in the ocean is taking in carbon dioxide, taking in sunlight, making food, and making 50% of the oxygen that we breathe. So these are fascinating organisms. So it's a book that focuses especially on phytoplankton, although you will see some zooplankton at the beginning, which that would be animal plankton. And I'm really excited. We haven't actually started the editing process yet because it's not due till 28, but it's on the horizon and I look forward. I love working on edits with you, Karen, so that'll be fun.
Well, I'm always excited when I see a new book by you that shows up in my inbox. And I was thrilled about this one because for me, the idea that there are these tiny, tiny things in the world that impact how we as humans are alive and breathing and functioning is really mind-blowing, right? And I think it's the kind of thing that's so interesting to not only kid readers, but their parents and librarians and teachers and other people who are reading with them. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think lots of schools really think about the rainforest as the lungs of the planet, and rainforests are incredibly important, but really the ocean is producing 50% of the oxygen we breathe, and it's also storing all this carbon that's the result of too. Like there's so much that's important about the ocean that I love to share in books.
That's great. So tell us what else is on your docket for this year.
Yeah, so I'm in this I've launched 2 books this year. My plan for the rest of this year is to really ramp up my efforts to get more school visits for myself. And I'm working on a project that I can't share yet, but I'm collaborating with another author on another project inspired by my expedition, but that's a top secret deal. So I'll be working on writing that while also trying to get more school visits booked for the coming year or two, because I love being with kids and I miss not having more of those visits this past year.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. Like I said at the beginning, it's always so nice to talk with you and see you. Thank you so much for sharing so much too. I'm sure that folks will be really interested in everything that you had to say.
Thank you so much.